I desensitize myself to it. I
Hey guys, my name is Rachel and welcome to episode number 3 in our Psychology of a Killer series. In yesterday's episode, we talked about the different motives of killers, whether it be childhood abuse or sexual motives. So if you haven't already, make sure to go ahead and check out episode number 2. In today's episode, we are going to be talking about how a killer does what he does. We're basically just going to be going through the process of what exactly is going through this person's head as they commit this vile act. I think it's important to learn about how they do what they do, not only so that we can understand them, but so we can keep ourselves safe. By understanding the process and general targets of serial killers or any other predators for that matter, we can avoid putting ourselves into possibly dangerous situations. But before I get into it, I do want to point out that I understand that women and anyone in general should not have to sit there and worry about someone harming them, and it is up to each individual not to go out and hurt anyone. And it is up to our society to make sure that we teach our children that it is not okay to hurt anyone. But no matter what we do, there's always going to be sickos out there who just don't care. They don't care what they were told. They don't care that they shouldn't hurt women or anyone, and they're just going to do it anyways. So no matter what, I think it's in all of our best interests to just take the precautions to keep ourselves safe in general. I also want to point out that it is very, very, very unlikely that any of you will be the victim of some horrible, heinous killer or anything like that, but it's still responsible to just make sure that you're aware of your surroundings and doing what you can to keep yourself safe. So anyways, with all of that being said, let's get into how a serial killer does what they do. So first, let's talk about a serial killer's triggers. What exactly triggers a serial killer to go off? Well, most of the time, a killer is triggered by a specific type of victim. Now, this isn't a blanket statement for every killer out there. Some killers just choose their victims at complete random, but most killers do have a very specific type of victim. For example, we all know that Ted Bundy chose pretty college-age brunettes most of the time. Others are triggered by young boys and girls. Others choose people that maybe resemble someone that they resent in their real life. For example, if someone had some very deep-seated resentment against their mother, they may choose women that resemble their mother. Also, like we said in episode number 1, a lot of killers will kill during times of incredible stress. They will do so to relieve this stress, whether it be something completely unrelated. Let's say they get fired from a job, so they take it out on someone else, or their wife divorces them, or they're just sick in general, and anything can trigger them. But either way, they'll go out and kill during periods of high stress and when they see their preferred victim. Now let's talk about their hunting grounds. Killers tend to prefer specific areas where they will find their victim. While these areas in specific will be different depending on the killer, each person has a place that is special to them. For example, David Berkowitz, or the Son of Sam, chose his victims around different areas of New York. That's where he was most comfortable. One reason that they choose specific areas to stick in is simply because that's where they find their preferred victims. Another reason might be because they want to stay in places that are close to home, places that they are comfortable with. They want to feel confident and in control, so they will stay in places that they know best. They want to know the lay of the land and the best spots to attack without being noticed or traced. heist. Others will use different modes of transportation to go across state lines to commit their crimes in many different places so that they can stay a few steps ahead of being caught by police. Killers who use this method are typically the most successful, who can go the longest amount of time without being caught, because a lot of times police won't catch on to the different crimes going on in different areas of the country because they just don't realize that they're connected. So that's why these guys are the hardest to catch. So now we're going to be talking about the targets of opportunity. So obviously there are types of people that are harder to attack than others. For example, sex workers are at higher risk of being met with foul play because they are out at night and they are willingly going to get into the car with someone who may want to hurt them. Or maybe a child who is maybe from not the best neighborhood who walks by him or herself to school. This type of child can be more at risk because, a creeper around the neighborhood, or just any creeper in general, can learn their walking schedule and they can be taken without any adult noticing. Or even a normal everyday girl like myself can become a victim if I'm not careful. For example, let's say I'm walking out of a Walmart in the dark into that big parking lot by myself and I'm just staring down at my phone, not paying attention. By doing this, I could be putting myself at risk. So then on the other hand, a child who is walking with a group of other children or with an adult is less likely to be taken by a creep because they're not going to risk that. They're not going to risk someone blatantly seeing them taking a child right in front of them and then being immediately caught. Or, using myself as an example, if I'm walking confidently, being aware of my surroundings, I make myself less of a target because they're looking for people who maybe aren't really paying attention because they're easy to grab without trouble. So there's just kind of a side note on how to keep yourself safe. I do plan on making a video about techniques of keeping yourself safe, but for now, just looking confident, being aware of your surroundings, looking around, not looking down at your phone, things like that, you can already put yourself at less risk. But either way, as we know, serial killers have their targets of opportunity and they will pick the easiest ones. So yes, serial killers do have their preferred target, but they will still choose the easiest one to get a hold of. If someone wants a child, they're not going to pick the child that is surrounded by adults. They're going to pick the child that is by themselves at night or something like that. They're not going to risk getting caught by choosing the most difficult one. They're going to go for the easiest target that they prefer. It's rare that a killer will have his sight on a very specific person and then go after them. So while it can happen, it's more rare that someone will, maybe have a list of names of specific people that they want to target, or, they'll go after businessmen or doctors or something like that. Someone who is more likely to have security in their home or to be with a group of people, things like that. They're not typically going to go after people like that. It's more likely that, for example, someone's target will just be in general an attractive young woman, and then will just go out looking for ones that are not paying attention or is drunk wandering alone, things like that. So now let's talk about exactly how a serial killer will go about their attack. The method in which a killer attacks is based solely on his psychological needs. Some prefer a simple, direct approach where they may ambush a girl walking alone in the middle of the night, for example. Others will use a more methodical yet simple approach. One example of this is spotting a child and then maybe following them around until they eventually bribe them and then convincing them to come with. Others will come up with a very elaborate plan to do what they do. For example, Ted Bundy would wear an arm sling and get young women to go with him to his car, using their empathetic nature, saying that he needs help with something. Other examples can be things like them pretending to be a repairman and showing up to people's houses or posing as a police officer. One of the most elaborate schemes is from H.H. Holmes, who literally built an entire building in the Inglewood suburb of Chicago during the Chicago World Fair so that he could lure his victims there. Next, as most of us know, serial killers have a specific signature, ritual, or MO. We know that the Zodiac Killer left a symbol at every crime scene. Now, as for a signature, this isn't something that actually really happens all that often in real life. It's more so something that movies will just sort of portray to make it more dramatic. However, when it is done in real life, most of the time it is only used as a sense of gratification from taunting people and generating media. But even then, it's still not very common because most serial killers are not interested in drawing attention to their crimes. Most of the time, they just want to be left alone so that they can continue what they're doing in private. However, most killers do have a more subtle signature that they aren't necessarily leaving behind on purpose. These signatures are more so just a unique psychological characteristic that they possess. Most killers have a very specific act of violence that they will do towards their victims. Their victims are usually killed in a very specific way, and it's rare that they will stray far away from that way that they're used to. So without necessarily leaving behind a card or symbol, they are leaving behind a mark that is showing that it's them. This is what investigators will use to try and create a profile for their suspect. They will use this killer's specific ritual or signature to come up with a psychological profile to try and trace their steps. The next thing we're going to be talking about is how a killer disposes of his victims' bodies. The way he does this is a big tell of his MO. Some killers actually enjoy the process of disposing a body, but for many others, they just do it for practical reasons so they don't get caught. I don't want to get into specifics of how a lot of killers choose to dispose their bodies because it can get so graphic, but most of the time it's just done to conceal what they've done. So basically they just do it because they have to, while others take pleasure in the process. Think of Jeffrey Dahmer. He definitely enjoyed the process. Others prefer to stay nearby their victims, so they'll bury them in their own backyards or put them somewhere that they can visit often. Whether they do something like this tells us a lot about the kind of killer that we are dealing with. So that is basically what is going through a killer's mind when they are committing these types of crimes and after. We know that what they do is rooted solely in their individual psyche. However, something that I would kind of like to know more about and look more into is about the connections between different kind of psyches and how that affects the process in which a killer does what they do. Is there something that maybe sexually motivated killers have in common on what they do? Is there something in common with people who do it for money on how they dispose their victims? That is definitely something that I will be looking more into. So that is it for today's episode. Tomorrow we are going to be getting into the first actual story of a serial killer and his history. The guy that we are going to be talking about tomorrow is probably one of the most appalling and vile killers that I've ever heard of. It is a truly disturbing story, and I honestly did not realize how disturbing it got until I was already like 5 hours into the research. So if you are enjoying this series so far, please make sure to leave this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Make sure to turn on notifications so that you don't miss any more videos in our Psychology of a Killer series. And if you have not checked out the previous 2 episodes, make sure to go ahead and do that. Also, make sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Both will be linked in the description box below. With that, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I will see you tomorrow for episode number 4. Bye!